What's going on, everybody? My name is Chimpact, and welcome to Week 4 Power Rankings. We had some great games this week. There's going to be a lot of movement going on in the Power Rankings. And let's just get started at number 10. We got GameboyLuke. Now, GameboyLuke, he was in my top 3 last week, and he's in the last spot, number 10. And in this week, I'm a bit disappointed in the way that he really prepped this week, and some of the plays that he made were also kind of questionable. So from the start, the one Pokemon that I didn't like that he brought was the Landorus. Now, Landorus with 4 attacks or Rock Polish would have been really good this week, but he brought a Scarf Lander this week, and I felt like he was a prisoner of the moment in the fact that Gator brought a very offensive team last week, and Scarf Lando does really well against offensive teams. But when you surround your Scarf Landorus with defensive Pokemon like Toxic, Spike, Tentacruel, Pokemon with Recovery, and like Intimidate Scrafty, it really doesn't work. Because you really want to U-turn out when you use U-turn with Landers into a heavy-hitting Pokemon to really punish the Pokemon that they switched into to take on your Landers, because they're typically going to bring in defensive Pokemon against your Landers. And when you bring in defensive Pokemon, they're going to be able to capitalize on that defensive Pokemon. And you're not really going to be able to capitalize that much because you're not really doing that much damage. You're pretty much relying on secondary effects from Pokemon like Tentacruel going for Scald or stuff like that. And adding on to that, when Landorus gets a kill, it's going to be forced to switch out, which doesn't really help when you have Toxic Spikes, because then they really aren't threatened by the Landorus. So I feel like if he brought a 4-attack Landorus or Rock Polish Landorus, it would have been a lot better. And outside of the prep, I felt like he let some of his Pokemon get toxic that he didn't really need to do. Now, the turn 1 play is kind of understandable because there's the fact that the Tentacruel could be Shuka Berry, and Gator could not go for Earthquake, and you could get up to Toxic Spikes up, or a Scald off, but like he did go for a Sea Stoner, so I can't really fault him for that. But letting your Pokemon get toxic, when the Celebi went for Toxic, and getting multiple Pokemon toxic is really not that good, especially when you have a more defensive team. He had Recovery on multiple Pokemon, he had Scrafty with Intimidate, and like you can't really afford to let your Pokemon get toxic. And that ultimately just led him to losing the game, because the Heat Trend was pretty much unbreakable as soon as some Pokemon got toxic, because the Heat Trend didn't really have a lot of offensive power outside of getting toxic off on those Pokemon and being able to stall them out of Recovery and stuff like that. So ultimately it was a tough loss, because Luke was pretty much prepping to play against offense and he didn't go against offense, and it just led to a loss there. But he was 3-0 going into that game, so can't really fault him too much. But other teams really performed really well, and that's the reason why I had to drop him a little bit. So at number 9, I have Under the Radar, and Kelly took an L this week despite having a 3-0 record going into the week as well, just like Luke. And I was disappointed in some of the plays that he made. His prep was pretty decent, but in hindsight, just looking back at the game, his team was really weak to T-Spike, so maybe seeing an Arbok on the team would have been really good, as it was a great resist to Kartana, forcing the Kartana go for Smart Strikes, which your team handles a little bit better. And just having an Absorber for Toxic Spikes would have been excellent. But at that point, like, you could just say that what if he just brought Spikes instead, and with the Excelgor, and then at that point you're just, I don't know what you can really do. It's a lose-lose in that situation. But the main gripe that I had with this game is the fact that he let the Aggron take so much damage from the Scald from the Slowking, the Slowbro, but still trying to go for Toxic, that's not a game-winning play, and I really did not like that. And I think that essentially lost him the game, because the Kartana was, after that damage, the Kartana was going to win the game. It was inevitable. There was no way that the Kartana was not going to be able to win the game, especially when there's no way that a Scarf Kartana is not going to be able to win the game. When the Superior is in Scarf, the Zygarde can't do enough damage with Extreme Speed. If it had Extreme Speed, the Kartana was just going to be able to win the game, especially with T-Spikes up. The Superior was eventually going to be weak enough to where a +1 Leaf Blade or a Leaf Blade outright was going to be able to knock it out. So, like, the one saving grace for Kelly, though, is that despite the huge discrepancy in the way that the game was played, like, Toxic Spikes plus Kartana should have 6-0'd. But the game was only a 2-0 win for Cybertron, and I really want to argue for Cybertron to be in the top 10, but it's really hard with the 2 losses that he had. But that's The 2 losses that he had, I feel like he really did not play that well. So Cybertron still needs to do a little bit more to be in the top 10. But I have Kelly, number 8, or number 9, and hopefully he can bounce back from this loss, just like GameboyLuke. Number 8, I have Vivid. Now Vivid, he is 2-2, and I still have him at number 8. And he was on a 2-game losing streak, but he managed to bounce back and get a very convincing win over Duncan. He played really well to deal with the Trick Room. Duncan kind of sequenced the Trick Room a little bit awkwardly. I felt like he didn't need to just set up the Trick Room immediately. He could have set it up a little bit better to where he was in a better position to really threaten his team. But he, Vivid really played around the Trick Room really well. He went out into every resist whenever Duncan went for a specific attack and was able to stall at the Trick Room and really take advantage of the Pokemon matchup as soon as Trick Room ended. And just the damage that the Bulu was doing with Nature's Madness and the Grass Stab that it had really set up the late game. Duncan's team was really weak to Hawlucha, and he didn't really even use Hawlucha to win the game. As soon as everything got weakened from the Bulu going for Nature's Madness and everything, Sharpedo just came in late game and was able to just sweep everything and really win. And ultimately it was just really good defensive play by Vivid to deal with the Trick Room and then eventually just win with Sharpedo. I felt like Vivid just had a great mindset going into the game, and he knew what he was going to do after every other turn. And it was kind of tough because like Duncan could have made just one prediction and he would have been a little off, but even then, like, he could still take 1 or 2 turns off and still be in a good commanding position. So he played that game really well and had a great game plan, and he didn't even really use Hawlucha that game. So that just goes to show you how like offensively well that he had built his team. So solid win by Vivid. Number 7, I have Patty, young Johnny Bravo with another dub. Against Kale, he brought some decent prep. Early on in the game, it was really tough to watch. The Diancie was just going in with Diamond Storm, Moonblast, HP Grass, and the Trick Room was a lot for our boy young Johnny Bravo to handle. But after he was able to maneuver around the Trick Room, just like Vivid, he eventually just went out to Alakazam and it was a wrap. The substitute set was just so good. Just being able to like, Alakazam is just such a good Pokemon in general. Just being able to trace anything and everything. You're going against a Volcanion, Water Absorb, Steam Eruption. You're going against Victory Bell. You just copy the Chlorophyll. You're going against Kingdra, Swift Swim. Like, there's so much that Alakazam can do, and it's just incredible. And you're going against Cresselia, Substitute. It's just great play and position to get the Alakazam in to win the game. And Patty Charles, excellent game plan, excellent. Number 6, I have It's Gator. It's Gator is not in the top 5, but maybe he will in the next coming weeks because he's got some very important games next week. He's got Envy next week. He's got Leo the week after. So big games to watch. And if the games go accordingly, Leo has yet to lose. Envy has yet to lose. And neither of those players have played a team that has won a game yet. So Envy has gone against winless opponents and Leo has gone against winless opponents. Gator, on the other hand, has gone against opponents that are undefeated every single week thus far. So week 1 0-0, week 2 1-0, week 2 2-0, 3-0, whatever. 0-0, 1-0, 2-0, 3-0 were his opponents going into the WBE, and very tough schedule. And you could argue that he's a top 3 battler because of those records, but I'm not, because he's 6. Okay, he's 6, and he had a great game plan going into this week despite the tough matchup. He picked apart Luke's defensive team. He wisely chose to just knock out the Tentacruel turn 1, despite the fact that there was a Scrafty in the back. Could have been really bad if Luke did switch to the Scrafty, but I don't know. It was still going to do a ton of damage to the Scrafty, so either way, it was kind of a win-win because dealing damage to the Scrafty meant that he didn't need to weaken it with one of his other Pokemon to eventually be able to knock it out. And just the fact that Luke didn't bring a Landorus that wasn't Scarfed was really good for Gator because Landorus absolutely demolished his team. So the way that Gator had to build his team, he had to build it very specifically so that the Landorus wasn't going to be able to take advantage of his team. So he couldn't really bring defensive Pokemon like Pyukumuku because the Landorus could just be able to take advantage of that, and he could go into his other Pokemon because Pyukumuku cannot learn any attacks. and like he can't really use Celebi because he can just pivot with U-turn. So like Gator had to build a very specific team, and Substitute, Toxic, Torment, Heatran was the perfect set to be able to deal with this team. He was able to Toxic multiple Pokemon. The Keldeo was a great bring. Gator is very experienced in draft format, and he brought that Keldeo against a similar team. His opponent had a Primarina. Luke had a Primarina as well, so like just bringing a Subcalm Mine Toxic Primarina, Keldeo to deal with Primarina is just very, very good. Primarina does get sound moves, but they're water sound moves, so they're not going to be that effective in dealing with the Substitute. And like that's just a very smart bring. Toxic Celebi was also good, as it was able to Toxic Pokemon that Heatran couldn't really deal with. So as soon as Heatran was able to substitute against this Pokemon, it was gonna do very, very well. It wasn't gonna go away for a long time. The Heracross was also excellent, as it was able to deal with Aerodactyl really well. Very, very solid win by Gator, and yeah, good job, Gator. Number 5, Wolf. Wolf had a great kimono this week and really powered up his late game. His title for the video though, he lied, so I decided to leave him out of the top 3 because of that. Don't lie, and maybe you'll be in the top 3, Wolf. Don't lie. That's all it is. That's all you gotta do. He had a really rough start in the early game with the Mandibuzz dying early on, and it really changed the way that Wolf had to play the game. I'm pretty sure that Mandibuzz was a way that he dealt with the Suicune by being able to whirlwind it out. So the Suicune became a lot more threatening as he couldn't phase it out. But the Extra was such a huge threat to Arboffin's team that he really positioned himself to where the Extra needed to be in when there were a lot of sand turns left. And the problem is that the Gigalith was in danger of dying multiple times, so he couldn't just go into Gigalith and set up the sand and then go into Excadrill, because either the Gigalith was going to die and he only had one really good turn, not turn, but series of turns to where Excadrill could really put in a lot of work, and Excadrill didn't, his team wasn't weak enough to do that at that stage of the game, so he still had to weaken his team. So he used Virizion and to really weaken his team. He used Gigalith Sand to weaken his team as well. And I really like the fact that Wolf really thought it through at the very end. I didn't like the fact that Wolf was like, okay, if you Shuka Metagross, that's really bad for me. But he realized that it really didn't matter if the Metagross was Shuka, because I'm pretty sure that the Z Earthquake still knocked out the Metagross. I'm pretty sure he said that. I haven't ran any calcs, but I believe Wolf, even though he lied to me in the title. He played that game really well. There was like some niche sets that could have been problematic, like a Custat Metagross with, or maybe not a Custat, maybe like a Shuka Metagross that was pretty offensive with Pyro Punch and Bullet Punch, because I didn't like the fact that he let the Virizion take damage because it put it in Bullet Punch range. So he could have played that game. It was kind of sloppy, but maybe he thought that he needed to do this place. But still a very good win by Wolf at number 5. Number 4, I have Leo. Leo continues his winning streak to impressive 4 wins, and Lopunny was pretty much the MVP he has. Going into this week, Reuniclus, he pretty much just used Reuniclus to win every single one of his games, and this week it was Lopunny that really put in all the work. I do ever want to say that I did not like the way that Gator played this game. I like the lead, I like the Sneasel. It had counter to deal with the Steelix. It was kind of anti-lead, but Leo was still able to get up the rocks, so it was really only a 1-for-1 trade. But it was a creative Sneasel set. The problem is that Gator acted like his Pokemon were incredibly defensive, so after Lopunny got a kill, he thought that Leo was going to either switch or that he could take the hits with his Pokemon. So he repeatedly went for setup moves with the Pokemon in the face of a Mon that could 2-hit KO it. And he did that every single turn until he lost the game. And I really didn't like that. He either should have had screens on his team so that that strategy would have worked a little bit more properly, or he should have just killed the Lopunny straight up, because the Lopunny was just a huge threat. And it kind of reminds me of the way that Joey played his game, or not the way that he played his game, but the way that Joey's game went this week, and I'll talk about that shortly. But Leo still won the game, so can't really fault him for that. But that's it. That's pretty much all I have to say. So solid game by Leo. So number 3, I have Envy. And there's something to say about Envy and the way that he's really beating his opponents. I feel like he's like the kryptonite to a lot of his opponents, because his opponents just make some really weird plays to try to deal with the way that Envy plays. And he really gets into their opponent's head before the battle even starts. And I feel like those mind games really really help Envy and really hurt his opponents, obviously. So this week, he brought a very defensive team with Subtoxic Registeel, Scarf Rotom, Ditto, and Duck Trio. Now, the Duck Trio with the Registeel and Ditto and Rotom Core really remind me of Stall when Duck Trio was legal. Stall really couldn't deal with Stall Breakers, obviously, so they would let a Pokemon go down, one of their least effective Pokemon in the game, and then they would go onto Duck Trio to trap the Stall Breaker. And they would be able to beat the Stall Breaker and then just be able to use Stall Tactics, Soft Boiled, Recover, Toxic, Stealth Rock, Spike, Whirlwind, to be able to deal with the rest of their team. That's how Stall would win with Duck Trio. That's one of the ways. Stall could win a plethora of other ways. Rage quit their opponent, etc, etc. But the way that Envy played this game was that he forced the Rhyperior and Arcanine to be played a little bit more conservative, because if they ever got a kill, the Duck Trio came in, trapped them, and got a kill. And Rhyperior and Arcanine are the only two Pokemon that can hit the Registeel for super effective damage with Stab. And Duck Trio being able to hit them super effective with Earthquake and be able to knock them out was actually incredible. Rotom can pivot into Duck Trio if it full switches on Arcanine, and the Rhyperior might not want to stand against the Rotom because of fearing of the Will-O-Wisp, and then he could pivot out into Arcanine thinking that. So it's just a very sneaky way, sneaky synergy for Rotom and Duck Trio. Now the Registeel works really well with Rotom because of the fact that it's immune to Earthquake and that he fears the Will-O-Wisp and stuff like that. And then last but not least, the the Ditto, which can take advantage of the Amoonguss, the Arcanine, and other Pokemon that he had on his team, being able to trace the regen, being able to dodge the Spore, being able to trace the Intimidate. It's just another defensive Pokemon. Like, Ditto's not really used as a defensive Pokemon, but in this matchup, it could easily be defensive because of the fact that you can trace Arcanine's Intimidate, it can't really do too much back to you. You can trace Amoonguss's Regenerator, get some HP back. And ultimately, the Registeel was basically the backbone of his team, and then he used the rest of his team to really support that with Duck Trio trapping. And it was just, like I said, really reminiscent of Stall with Duck Trio when it was legal in OU and Sun and Moon. So number 2, I have Joey, and it's really tough for me to put Joey at number 2, even though he's 6-0 at his opponent, because I don't know. Like, he played really well. But I don't really know what else I can say. Like, I felt like Mo didn't make the correct play by going for Rock Tomb over Scald initially, but it really didn't matter because Joey got a timely special defense drop on an AV Blastoise, and unfortunately he did miss the Rock Tomb, but if he did Scald first, it would have been a little bit better for him. But ultimately it really didn't matter because of the special defense drop. He was able to hit him with the Z move the turn after, and Blastoise was actually very, very problematic for his team. But like I said, dealing damage to the Blastoise or killing the Blastoise, it really didn't matter because after the Blastoise did take pretty much like 80 damage, 90 damage from the Bug Buzz and then the Z Bug Buzz the turn after, it really wasn't a threat anymore because everything else on his team was going to be able to outspeed it because it was an AV Blastoise. It wasn't really that offensive. And ultimately, the way that Joey plays, he plays with multiple contingency plans. So if one of his win cons isn't going to be viable in a certain matchup, then he can just use another one. You could see it in his game 1, week 1 game against Pokemon, where he had both Comfy and Crocodile, which were capable of winning the game. In week 2, he had multiple Pokemon win the game, and in this week he had Scarf Crocodile, which was very capable of winning the game. Volcarona, Comfy, like every week, Joey makes fun of himself. He's like, "Oh my god, Comfy goes in," and then he intentionally made fun of himself this week, which is kind of funny. Anyways, yeah, I have him at number 2. It's tough, man. Like, he got really lucky in this game, but like in the earlier weeks, I did put A-Drive in the top 2, top 1, and he got incredibly lucky. But like I felt like it was inevitable. Even though like Joey didn't really need Volcaron to win the game, he just needed the blast this weekend. It was part of his game plan. And because he did miss the Rock Tomb, because he did get the special defense drop, he was able to win the game as a result as well. But that's what happens when you use Rock Tomb. It's really unfortunate that he literally brought Rock Tomb so that it's more accurate than Rock Slide, and it just missed anyway. And it's just stupid that there's no accurate Rock Top move that's physical, because he couldn't use special because Volcaron increases his special defense, and Quiver Dance can get it out of hand, so he had to use a physical Rock move. But anyways, that's just very unfortunate. And I have 8Drive as number 1, and this week he really showed how powerful his team was. Drew has one of the best teams in the league. Nihilego, Gyarados, just a bunch of threats on his team, and 8Drive has some very good defensive Pokemon. If you think about it, Gastron and Skarmory form a very good defensive core. The 2 weaknesses that Skarmory has, Fire and Electric, Gastron resists. The 1 weakness that Gastron has, Skarmory resists 4 times. Gastron only has 1 weakness, and like it's very easy to deal with because he's used Rindo Berry on it twice. He was able to dodge a Blisseythlon kill with HP Grass, and he was able to prevent him losing straight up to Nihilego this week by having Rindo Berry on it this week. He's brought Gastron every week this season, and it's put in work literally every week because of its versatility. Like, he can make it defensive, he can make it especially defensive. When he makes it especially defensive, it's incredibly hard to kill because you can only hit it with HP Grass. And if you don't bring Gastrodon win week and they have HP Grass on multiple Pokemon, you pretty much already won the prep at that point, because they brought HP Grass on multiple Pokemon when they could have brought a different coverage move to deal with your other team members. And like outside of the prep, outside of how good Gastrodon is, outside of his good defensive core, he played this game really well. He made an excellent toxic play on Drew's Ambipom, which slowed it down its offensive immensely. Outside of the toxic, I don't really know how he's going to deal with the Ambipom because it outsped his entire team, from what I remember. And it was Nasty Plot, and Nasty Plot would have, like, it was just, it was going to be very tough to knock out and tough to take hits as well. And like going back to the defensive core, it becomes even that much more threatening when Kieran Black is killing offensive Pokemon or even defensive Pokemon so that it can prevent Toxics. Like if it's killing your Pokemon that has Toxic, that prevents a Toxic on Gastrodon. If it's killing a Pokemon that has HP Grass, it's preventing an HP Grass from going on Gastrodon. So like defensive synergy between Skarm, Gastrodon, and Florges really help. Like if Florges prevents Burns on Skarm, Toxic on Gastrodons, and it can wish up Skarmory if he doesn't have an opportunity to go for Roost against his team, and it defogs to prevent spikes and toxic spikes. And like Kyurem can, like I said, just prevent defensive Pokemon from going for toxic by just outright killing them, and it can kill offensive Pokemon from being able to hit those Pokemon with HP Grass or whatever coverage move. So I apologize for not putting 8Drive in my top 10 in the preseason power rankings. I felt like that was a huge mistake on my part. I definitely overlooked this team. And going into the next couple weeks, we have some very good games to look into. Joey versus Wolf is this week. We'll see this game this weekend. Gator versus Envy is this week, and then Gator versus Leo the week after. So those are going to be very good games to watch. Envy, the pattern continues. Gator is going against undefeated opponents. Envy is undefeated, has yet to lose, and Gator has not played any opponent that has yet to lose. And this will be Envy's first opponent where their opponent has a win. And if Leo wins his next game as well in this upcoming week, Gator will also be his first opponent that has a win as well. And Gator will be once again playing against an undefeated opponent if Leo also wins. So those are some games to watch in the upcoming weeks. Hope you guys enjoyed the power rankings. Goodbye.